The unthinkable has happened, and wrestling will never be the same again. What do you do when the most dominant force in WWE history gets absolutely demolished on live television? How do you process watching a man who has conquered everyone from The Undertaker to Roman Reigns get dismantled like he's never stepped foot in a ring before? The answer is simple: you don't. Because what unfolded on WWE Smackdown December 5, 2025, wasn't just a beatdown. It was a public execution. It was the end of an era wrapped in Samoan fury and delivered with the kind of violence that makes you question everything you thought you knew about professional wrestling. Jacob Fatu didn't just attack Brock Lesnar. He didn't just jump him from behind or catch him off guard with a steel chair. No, what Jacob Fatu did to the Beast Incarnate on Friday Night SmackDown was nothing short of a statement written in blood, sweat, and shattered bones. This wasn't wrestling. This was warfare. And when the smoke cleared and the cameras finally cut away, one question echoed through every arena seat, every living room, and every social media timeline across the globe: is Brock Lesnar's reign of terror actually over? The WWE Universe has witnessed countless shocking moments throughout its storied history. Stone Cold Steve Austin stunning Mr. McMahon. The Shield's explosive debut. Roman Reigns turning heel and aligning with Paul Heyman. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared anyone for the sheer brutality that Jacob Fatu unleashed upon Brock Lesnar. This wasn't a worked shoot. This wasn't carefully choreographed entertainment designed to pop the crowd. This felt real. This felt personal. This felt like Jacob Fatu reached into the deepest, darkest part of his Samoan warrior heritage and channeled every ounce of ancestral rage into 20 minutes of absolute carnage. The lead-up to this moment had been building for weeks, simmering beneath the surface of SmackDown programming like a volcano ready to erupt. Tensions between the Bloodline and Brock Lesnar had reached a boiling point after Lesnar made it crystal clear that he wanted one more match, one more moment of glory, one more opportunity to cement his legacy as the most feared competitor in WWE history. But what Lesnar didn't account for was the newest, most dangerous member of the Bloodline. A man whose reputation for violence preceded him long before he ever signed a WWE contract. Jacob Fatu, the Samoan werewolf, had been lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting, calculating the perfect moment to strike. And on December 5th, that moment arrived with the force of a freight train. The night started like any other SmackDown episode. Championship implications hung in the air. Backstage segments teased upcoming rivalries. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, expecting the usual blend of athleticism and storytelling that WWE delivers week after week. Brock Lesnar's music hit, and as always, the arena exploded. Love him or hate him, there's an undeniable electricity that fills the building whenever the Beast makes his entrance. His presence alone shifts the atmosphere. Grown men become nervous. Competitors backstage take notice. Paul Heyman, ever the eloquent mouthpiece, stood beside his client with that familiar smirk, ready to deliver another masterclass in promotional prowess. But here's where everything changed. Here's where the night took a turn that nobody saw coming. As Lesnar stood in the center of the ring, soaking in the mixture of cheers and boos, the lights suddenly cut out. Complete darkness. The kind of darkness that makes your heart skip a beat because you know something massive is about to happen. And then, piercing through the silence, came the haunting sound of a Samoan war chant. Not the polished, produced version you hear in entrance themes. This was raw. This was primal. This sent chills down the spine of every single person in that building. When the lights came back up, Jacob Fatu stood on the entrance ramp, but he wasn't alone. The entire Bloodline flanked him: Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, a family united with singular purpose. But all eyes were on Fatu. His physique, a perfect blend of power and agility, rippled with contained violence. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Lesnar with an intensity that could melt steel. This wasn't about championships. This wasn't about main event spots or WrestleMania paydays. This was about respect. This was about legacy. This was about showing the entire world that there's a new apex predator in WWE, and his name is Jacob Fatu. The confrontation that followed was electric. Paul Heyman, doing what he does best, attempted to defuse the situation with words, trying to broker some kind of understanding between two immovable forces. But words mean nothing when violence is the only language both men speak fluently. Lesnar, never one to back down from any challenge, beckoned Fatu to enter the ring. The crowd sensed it. Social media exploded in real time. This was happening. This was actually happening. The moment wrestling fans had been fantasizing about since Jacob Fatu's WWE debut was about to become reality. But here's the first twist. The first moment that shattered expectations and sent the narrative careening in an unexpected direction. Fatu didn't rush the ring. He didn't take Lesnar's bait. Instead, with calculated precision, the bloodline surrounded the ring from all sides, cutting off every possible escape route. This wasn't going to be a fair fight. This wasn't going to be one-on-one combat between two warriors. This was going to be an assassination. And Brock Lesnar, perhaps for the first time in his legendary career, looked concerned. The attack, when it finally came, was swift and merciless. Solo Sikoa slid into the ring first, absorbing Lesnar's initial counterattack with frightening ease. Then Tama Tonga from the opposite side. Then Tonga Loe. Like wolves descending on prey, the bloodline systematically broke down the beast incarnate's defenses. German suplexes, the move that has finished countless opponents over Lesnar's career, barely fazed these Samoan warriors. It was like watching a legend realize that his greatest weapons no longer held the same power they once did. And then Jacob Fatu entered the equation. The moment his boots touched that canvas, the entire complexion of the assault changed. What had been a coordinated beatdown transformed into something altogether more sinister. Fatu moved with a fluidity that shouldn't be possible for a man his size, connecting with strikes that echoed throughout the arena. A spinning back fist caught Lesnar flush on the jaw. A Samoan drop, executed with such force that the ring literally shook. But Fatu wasn't finished. Not even close. Here's what separated this attack from every other gang beatdown in WWE history, the psychology behind it. Jacob Fatu wasn't just hurting Brock Lesnar physically. He was dismantling the aura of invincibility that has surrounded Lesnar for over 2 decades. Every move was deliberate. Every strike was calculated. When Fatu locked in a Tongan death grip, squeezing Lesnar's throat with vice-like pressure, you could see the fear creeping into the beast's eyes. When was the last time anyone saw fear in Brock Lesnar's eyes? When was the last time he looked human? The WWE referees, predictably, tried to restore order. They failed spectacularly. Security rushed the ring. They were dispatched with contemptuous ease. Even when members of the locker room, faces and heels alike, attempted to make the save, the bloodline repelled them all. This was their moment. This was their statement. And nobody was going to stop them from delivering it in the most emphatic way possible. The second major twist came approximately 60 seconds into the assault when Paul Heyman, Lesnar's advocate and closest confidant, did the unthinkable. Instead of trying to help his client, instead of calling for more help or attempting to create a distraction, Heyman slowly backed up the entrance ramp, turned his back, and walked away. The man who has stood beside Brock Lesnar through every war, every championship reign, every historic moment, simply abandoned him. The betrayal was so shocking, so completely unexpected, that the commentators fell silent. The crowd erupted in a deafening mixture of shock and anger. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of millions trying to process what they'd just witnessed. But why? Why would Paul Heyman abandon the meal ticket that has defined his career for years? The answer would only become clear in the aftermath, but in that moment, as Lesnar looked up from the canvas, blood streaming down his face, searching for the one person he thought he could always count on, the emotional devastation was palpable. This wasn't just a physical beating anymore. This was psychological warfare at its finest. And the bloodline knew exactly what they were doing. Jacob Fatu, sensing Lesnar's emotional vulnerability, escalated the violence to levels rarely seen on mainstream television. A moonsault from the top rope, executed with the grace of a cruiserweight but landing with the impact of a bomb, drove whatever remaining air existed in Lesnar's lungs straight out of his body. The sickening thud echoed through the arena. Medical personnel tried to intervene. They were physically removed from ringside by the bloodline's outer circle. This massacre was going to continue until Jacob Fatu decided it was over, and not a second sooner. The assault reached its horrifying climax when Fatu dragged Lesnar's lifeless body to the corner, positioned him against the turnbuckles, and delivered his signature hip attack with such devastating force that it looked like a car crash in slow motion. Once, twice, 3 times. Each impact more brutal than the last. By the 4th connection, Lesnar's body had gone completely limp, held upright only by the ropes. The crowd, which had been screaming throughout the entire attack, fell eerily silent. This had crossed the line from entertainment into something darker, something more disturbing. When Jacob Fatu finally stood over Brock Lesnar's broken body, raising his arms in victory while the rest of the bloodline stood guard around him, the image was instantly iconic. This was WWE's newest monster. This was the man who had done what nobody thought possible. He had destroyed Brock Lesnar. Not just beaten him. Not just bested him in competition.
destroyed him, broken him, ended him.
The aftermath of the attack sent shockwaves through the entire wrestling industry. Social media didn't just break, it exploded into millions of fragments of speculation, analysis, and disbelief. Hashtags related to the attack trended worldwide within minutes. Wrestling journalists scrambled to get statements from WWE officials. Retired legends took to their podcasts and YouTube channels to dissect every second of what they'd witnessed. The consensus was universal: professional wrestling had just changed forever. Emergency medical technicians finally gained access to the ring once the bloodline departed, and what they found was genuinely concerning. Brock Lesnar, the man who has walked away from matches with broken ribs, concussions, and every other injury imaginable, couldn't stand under his own power. The visual of the beast incarnate being loaded onto a stretcher, neck brace secured, oxygen mask covering his face, was jarring in ways that transcended typical wrestling angles. This looked real. This felt real. And that's what made it so effective. But let's address the massive elephant in the room: Paul Heyman's betrayal. As Lesnar was being wheeled to the back, cameras caught Heyman standing in the backstage area, watching multiple monitors that showed his former client's destruction from different angles.
The expression on his face wasn't remorse. It wasn't guilt. It was satisfaction.
Pure, unadulterated satisfaction. And that's when the third twist revealed itself in all its shocking glory. Paul Heyman slowly turned to face the camera, that familiar smirk creeping across his face, and he uttered words that will be replayed in wrestling highlight packages for decades to come. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman, and I am no longer the advocate for Brock Lesnar. I am, was, and forever shall be, the wise man of the bloodline."
And Jacob Fatu?
Jacob Fatu is my new Paul Heyman guy. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Everything suddenly made sense. The coordinated nature of the attack. The perfect timing. The way the bloodline seemed to know exactly where Lesnar would be vulnerable. Paul Heyman hadn't just abandoned his client in a moment of weakness, he had orchestrated the entire assassination from start to finish. This had been planned for weeks, maybe months. Every interaction between Heyman and Lesnar, every strategy session, every moment of supposed loyalty had been a calculated deception leading to this exact moment. The wrestling world immediately began dissecting the implications. If Paul Heyman was now fully aligned with the bloodline, and Jacob Fatu had essentially ended Brock Lesnar's career in one night, what did this mean for the power structure of WWE?
Who could possibly stop the bloodline now?
They already controlled multiple championships. They already had the numbers advantage. And now they had the single most brilliant wrestling mind of the past 3 decades orchestrating their every move. The bloodline hadn't just become the most dominant faction in WWE, they had become virtually unstoppable. In the days following the attack, WWE programming dedicated significant airtime to the fallout.
Smackdown's ratings soared to heights not seen in years.
Clips of the assault racked up hundreds of millions of views across social media platforms. Every wrestling publication ran headlines about Jacob Fatu's ascension and Brock Lesnar's shocking downfall. The narrative had captured not just wrestling fans but mainstream attention as well. ESPN covered it.
Major sports networks discussed it.
Jacob Fatu's name became synonymous with violence, dominance, and the changing of the guard in professional wrestling. Behind the scenes, reports emerged about Brock Lesnar's condition. While WWE officially maintained kayfabe, listing him as indefinitely suspended due to injuries sustained in the attack, rumors swirled about whether this was the end of his full-time career. For a man who has competed at the highest levels of both professional wrestling and mixed martial arts, who has conquered every challenge placed before him, the idea that Jacob Fatu might have been the one to finally break the beast was both poetic and tragic. The psychological implications of the attack extend far beyond Lesnar himself. Every wrestler on the WWE roster now knows what the bloodline is capable of. They witnessed, in graphic detail, what happens when you cross Roman Reigns' family. They saw that no amount of individual talent, no legendary reputation, no history of dominance can protect you if the bloodline decides you're a problem that needs to be eliminated. Jacob Fatu didn't just attack Brock Lesnar, he sent a message to the entire locker room written in blood and broken bones. And what about Roman Reigns in all of this? The tribal chief's conspicuous absence during the actual attack raised fascinating questions.
Did he sanction it? Did he order it?
Or did Jacob Fatu act independently, forcing Roman to either approve or risk appearing weak by condemning his own family member? The power dynamics within the bloodline suddenly became much more complex and interesting. Perhaps Jacob Fatu isn't just another soldier in Roman's army. Perhaps he's positioning himself as an equal, or even as someone ready to challenge for leadership of the family. the business implications are equally significant. WWE now has a red-hot storyline heading into their next premium live event. The rematch, should Brock Lesnar be cleared to compete, would be one of the most anticipated matches in recent memory. But here's the thing, should there be a rematch? Has Jacob Fatu established such complete dominance that giving Lesnar another opportunity would actually diminish the impact of what happened on December 5th? These are the questions that WWE's creative team is undoubtedly grappling with as they chart the course forward. From a storytelling perspective, what makes this angle so compelling is the layers of complexity woven throughout. On the surface, it's a straightforward monster debut. New guy destroys established legend to announce his arrival. But dig deeper and you find Paul Heyman's calculated betrayal, the questions about power within the bloodline, the larger implications for WWE's hierarchy, and the very real possibility that we've witnessed a permanent shift in the landscape of professional wrestling.
Jacob Fatu himself became an overnight megastar. Before December 5th, hardcore fans knew his work from the independent circuit and his time in Major League Wrestling. They understood his capabilities and appreciated his unique blend of size, athleticism, and intensity. But casual fans, the millions who tune into WWE without following the broader wrestling world, had no frame of reference for who this man was. Now they know.
Now everyone knows. Jacob Fatu is the man who destroyed Brock Lesnar, and that's a reputation that opens every door in the industry. The attack also reignited debates about wrestling's relationship with violence and how far is too far in terms of depicting brutality on television. Critics argued that the assault crossed lines of good taste, that showing Brock Lesnar in such a vulnerable, damaged state was inappropriate for WWE's PG programming. Defenders countered that wrestling has always pushed boundaries, that memorable moments require intensity, and that the attack was no more graphic than countless classic angles from wrestling's past. The controversy itself generated additional publicity, keeping the story in the public consciousness long after the attack itself ended. As the wrestling world continues processing the ramifications of Jacob Fatu's assault on Brock Lesnar, one thing remains crystal clear: the landscape has fundamentally changed. The old guard, represented by Lesnar and his era of dominance, has been violently displaced. A new era, led by the bloodline and specifically by Jacob Fatu, has begun. Whether this signals a return to more aggressive, harder-edged programming or simply represents one explosive moment in an ongoing narrative remains to be seen. What we witnessed on WWE Smackdown December 5, 2025, was more than just an angle. It was a seismic shift in professional wrestling's power structure. It was the coronation of a new monster. It was the end of one legend and the birth of another. Jacob Fatu didn't just attack Brock Lesnar, he rewrote the rules of engagement for an entire generation of wrestlers. And as the bloodline stands tall, united under Paul Heyman's guidance, with Jacob Fatu as their ultimate weapon, one terrifying question looms over WWE. If they can do this to Brock Lesnar, what are they capable of doing to everyone else? The answer to that question might be something nobody wants to discover. But in WWE, in the bloodline's WWE, you don't get to choose whether you face that violence. You only get to choose how you respond when it comes for you. And on December 5, 2025, violence came for the Beast incarnate. And the Beast fell. Hard. How does a man betray a partnership that defined 2 decades of professional wrestling? What kind of cold calculation does it require to look your meal ticket in the eyes, shake his hand before a show, and then orchestrate his complete annihilation mere hours later?
These aren't rhetorical questions anymore.
These are the haunting realities that Paul Heyman forced the entire wrestling world to confront when he revealed himself as the puppet master behind Jacob Fatu's savage destruction of Brock Lesnar. But here's what nobody saw coming. What makes this betrayal so much deeper and more sinister than anyone initially realized? This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This wasn't Paul Heyman simply jumping to the winning team. This was a meticulously crafted conspiracy that had been in motion since the very moment Roman Reigns first acknowledged the bloodline's expansion. The full scope of Heyman's deception only became clear in the days following the attack, as WWE programming slowly peeled back the layers of this intricate web. On the Monday Night Raw following that fateful Smackdown, Michael Cole sat down for an exclusive interview with Paul Heyman, and what transpired was nothing short of a masterclass in manipulation, justification, and the art of burning bridges so thoroughly that not even ashes remain. Heyman, dressed impeccably as always, sat across from Cole with the demeanor of a man completely at peace with his decisions, a man who had finally unburdened himself from a relationship that had, in his words, outlived its usefulness and become an anchor preventing the tribal chief from achieving his ultimate destiny.
But let's rewind for a moment, because understanding Paul Heyman's betrayal requires understanding the history that preceded it. When Heyman first aligned himself with Brock Lesnar back in 2012, it was presented as a perfect symbiosis, the Beast incarnate paired with the Advocate, brute force enhanced by brilliant strategy. Together, they conquered WWE, breaking The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, capturing multiple championships, and establishing Lesnar as the most feared competitor in professional wrestling. Heyman provided the words that Lesnar never needed to speak. He crafted the narratives that elevated Lesnar from mere fighter to mythological force of nature. Yet, as Heyman explained during his Raw interview, the partnership had become increasingly one-sided. Brock Lesnar, Heyman stated with chilling precision, is a mercenary. He fights for money, for ego, for the thrill of domination. But he never fought for legacy. He never fought for family. He never understood that in this business, true power doesn't come from individual accomplishments, it comes from dynasty. It comes from bloodlines that transcend generations. And when Roman Reigns offered me the opportunity to be part of something greater than any single competitor, no matter how dominant, I had to make a choice between past glory and future immortality. The revelation sent shockwaves through the wrestling community because it fundamentally recontextualized everything fans thought they understood about recent WWE history. Suddenly, moments that seemed organic took on new meaning. Remember when Roman Reigns first acknowledged Paul Heyman at the head of the table? That wasn't Roman extending an olive branch to his former advocate. That was Heyman beginning his infiltration of the bloodline's inner circle. Remember when Heyman seemed to struggle with divided loyalties between Roman and Brock? That wasn't genuine conflict. That was theater designed to keep Lesnar trusting while Heyman gathered intelligence on his vulnerabilities, his patterns, his psychological pressure points. Every strategy session between Heyman and Lesnar had been compromised. Every game plan had been shared with the bloodline. Every weakness Lesnar revealed in private had been catalogued and weaponized. Paul Heyman hadn't just betrayed Brock Lesnar on December 5th, he had been betraying him for months, perhaps years, feeding information to the bloodline while maintaining the facade of loyal advocacy. The attack itself was merely the culmination of the most elaborate long con in modern wrestling history. But here's where the story takes another dark turn, where Paul Heyman's genius truly reveals itself in all its terrifying glory. During that Raw interview, Heyman pulled out his phone, scrolled through his messages, and showed Michael Cole, and by extension, the millions watching at home, text conversations with Solo Sikoa dating back 8 months. Messages discussing Lesnar's training schedule. Photos of Lesnar's workout routines shared with the Bloodline's camp. Detailed breakdowns of Lesnar's go-to moves and the specific body mechanics required to counter them. Heyman had been providing the Bloodline, and specifically Jacob Fatu, with a complete blueprint for dismantling the Beast incarnate. You see, Michael, Heyman explained, his voice dripping with condescension. Everyone assumes that Jacob Fatu destroyed Brock Lesnar because of superior physicality or Samoan warrior spirit or some mystical family power. They are missing the point entirely. Jacob Fatu destroyed Brock Lesnar because I taught him how. I showed him where Brock's ribs are vulnerable after years of diverticulitis issues. I explained exactly which angle to attack Lesnar's neck to exploit old UFC injuries. I choreographed that entire assault with surgical precision. Jacob Fatu was the weapon, but I was the one who loaded him, aimed him, and pulled the trigger. The wrestling world reeled from these revelations. If Paul Heyman had been planning this betrayal for months, feeding the bloodline inside information while pretending to advocate for Lesnar, what did that mean for every match Lesnar had competed in during that time period? Were outcomes predetermined not just in the traditional wrestling sense, but actually influenced by Heyman sabotaging his own client? The implications were staggering and called into question the legitimacy of everything fans had watched over the past year. But Heyman wasn't finished dropping bombshells. The most shocking revelation came when he addressed his relationship with Roman Reigns directly. Everyone wants to know about the power structure within the bloodline, Heyman said, leaning forward with that shark-like grin that has become his trademark. They want to know if Roman ordered the hit on Brock, or if Jacob acted alone, or if there's dissension in the ranks. Let me make something perfectly clear. There is no dissension because there is perfect harmony of purpose. Roman Reigns is the tribal chief, the head of the table, the undisputed leader of this family. But every great leader needs a strategist, a wise man, someone who can see moves ahead of the competition. That's my role. And when I identified Jacob Fatu as the perfect instrument to eliminate the one threat that still loomed over Roman's empire, the tribal chief gave me his blessing to execute the plan in whatever manner I deemed appropriate. This confirmation that Roman Reigns had sanctioned the attack,
that it wasn't some rogue operation by an out-of-control family member but rather a calculated strategic strike approved at the highest level, fundamentally changed the narrative. This wasn't chaos, this was order. This wasn't a crack in the Bloodline's foundation, this was their foundation proving stronger than ever. And most terrifyingly, this demonstrated that the Bloodline under Paul Heyman's guidance operates with a level of strategic sophistication that no other faction in WWE history has ever achieved. The question that naturally emerged from all of this was simple yet profound. Why now? Why, after years of partnership with Brock Lesnar, did Paul Heyman choose this specific moment to execute his betrayal? The answer, as Heyman gleefully explained, had everything to do with timing and opportunity. Brock Lesnar had been making noise about one more championship run, one more WrestleMania main event, one more moment in the spotlight. But from Heyman's perspective, Lesnar had become a liability, a symbol of the old guard refusing to step aside for the new era. More crucially, Lesnar's presence as an independent operator, someone not aligned with any faction but still possessing enough star power to influence WWE's direction, represented an unpredictable variable in the Bloodline's plans for total dominance. Brock Lesnar was a problem, Heyman stated matter-of-factly. Not because he was challenging for titles or because he was particularly threatening to Roman's position, but because he represented the old way of doing business in WWE. The lone wolf. The special attraction. The part-timer who shows up, collects a big check, and disappears without contributing to the larger ecosystem. That model is dead. The Bloodline has killed it. We operate as a unit, as a family, as a cohesive force that elevates everyone within its structure. There was no place for Brock Lesnar in this new WWE. So we removed him from the equation. The cold, corporate language Heyman used to describe ending his partnership with Lesnar was chilling precisely because of its detached professionalism. This wasn't presented as an emotional decision or a passionate betrayal born from heated conflict. This was business. This was strategy. This was Paul Heyman applying the same ruthless calculation to human relationships that a CEO might apply to streamlining a company's organizational chart. Brock Lesnar wasn't a person in Heyman's explanation, he was an outdated business model that required elimination. But if anyone thought Heyman's betrayal of Lesnar meant he had gone soft or become merely a spokesman for Roman Reigns, they were disabused of that notion quickly. In the same Raw interview, Heyman made it explicitly clear that his alliance with the Bloodline was not subservience but partnership. I am not Roman Reigns' employee, Heyman declared. I am his wise man. I am the architect of dynasty. And Jacob Fatu? Jacob Fatu is my Paul Heyman guy in ways that Brock Lesnar never fully was. Because Jacob understands that success in this business isn't just about physical dominance, it's about submission to strategy, about trusting in a larger vision, about being willing to do whatever is necessary to achieve greatness. This positioned Jacob Fatu not as simply another member of the Bloodline but as Paul Heyman's personal project, his new masterpiece in the making. If Brock Lesnar was the prototype, raw power and intensity with strategic guidance, then Jacob Fatu represented the perfected model. He possessed the same physical attributes as Lesnar but with better agility, more versatility, and crucially, a willingness to operate within a team structure rather than as a lone wolf. Heyman had found his ideal client, and in doing so, had rendered Brock Lesnar obsolete. The backstage reaction to Heyman's revelations was predictably intense. Wrestlers who had competed against Lesnar during the period when Heyman was feeding information to the Bloodline felt betrayed and manipulated. Several WWE legends took to social media to condemn Heyman's actions, calling them the worst betrayal in wrestling history and questioning whether someone capable of such deception should be allowed to continue working in the industry. Stone Cold Steve Austin dedicated an entire podcast episode to discussing the situation, stating that while he respected Heyman's brilliance, this crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed even in the deliberately blurred reality of professional wrestling. But perhaps the most fascinating response came from Brock Lesnar himself. 4 days after the attack, Lesnar remained silent. No social media posts. No interviews. No public statements. The silence was deafening and, frankly, uncharacteristic for someone who had always projected such confidence and dominance. When Lesnar finally broke his silence, he did so in the most Brock Lesnar way possible, not through a prepared statement or a carefully scripted promo, but by showing up unannounced at WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, and demanding a meeting with Vince McMahon's successors, Nick Khan and Triple H. Leaked reports from that meeting painted a picture of a man consumed by rage but channeling it with frightening focus. Lesnar reportedly demanded two things: a one-on-one match with Jacob Fatu at the Royal Rumble, and Paul Heyman banned from ringside during that match. But WWE's response stunned everyone. they refused. Not because they didn't want the match, but because they felt Lesnar hadn't earned the opportunity for immediate revenge. If Lesnar wanted Jacob Fatu, he would have to prove he was still capable of competing at the highest level after the devastating attack. He would have to win qualifying matches. He would have to demonstrate that the Beast Incarnate still existed and wasn't just a broken shell of his former self. This decision by WWE brass added another layer to the narrative. By forcing Lesnar to earn his redemption rather than handing him an automatic rematch, WWE acknowledged that the landscape had genuinely changed. Brock Lesnar's name and reputation no longer automatically granted him main event status. He would have to reclaim his position through performance, through victories, through proving that Paul Heyman's assessment of him as outdated and obsolete was wrong. The psychological warfare component of this story had reached new heights. Meanwhile, Paul Heyman continued his media tour, appearing on every wrestling podcast, every sports talk show, every platform that would have him, systematically dismantling Brock Lesnar's legacy with carefully chosen words. He painted Lesnar as a mercenary without loyalty, a fighter who cared only about money rather than the craft of professional wrestling. He contrasted Lesnar's selfishness with the Bloodline's unity, Lesnar's part-time schedule with the Bloodline's constant presence. Every interview was a character assassination, every statement was designed to diminish Lesnar's accomplishments and elevate the Bloodline's superiority. But here's what makes Paul Heyman truly dangerous. What separates him from every other wrestling manager or advocate in history is not just rewriting the present, he's retroactively rewriting the past. In Heyman's current narrative, every Brock Lesnar accomplishment during their partnership was actually Paul Heyman's accomplishment. Breaking The Undertaker's streak? Heyman's strategy. Conquering John Cena? Heyman's game plan. Winning the Universal Championship? Heyman's political maneuvering behind the scenes. Heyman was systematically erasing Brock Lesnar from his own legacy, claiming all credit for their shared success while dumping all blame for any failures solely on Lesnar's shoulders. The audacity of this historical revisionism was breathtaking. And yet, because Heyman delivered it with such conviction, with such detailed supporting evidence, casual fans began to believe it. Social media debates raged about what percentage of Lesnar's success was truly his own versus how much was manufactured by Heyman's brilliance. The longer Lesnar remained off television recovering from the attack, the more Heyman's version of events became the accepted narrative. This was psychological warfare at its absolute finest: destroy a man physically, then destroy his legacy while he's unable to defend himself. Jacob Fatu, for his part, remained largely silent during this period, letting Heyman do the talking while he continued to dominate in the ring. But when he finally did address the attack during a backstage segment on Smackdown, his words were chilling in their simplicity. Paul Heyman showed me the blueprint. I executed the plan. Brock Lesnar will never be the same. And anyone else who steps to the bloodline will suffer the same fate. This is our era now. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop us. The message was clear and terrifying. This wasn't personal for Jacob Fatu. This was business. This was establishing dominance. This was sending a message to the entire roster that the bloodline, armed with Paul Heyman's strategic genius and Jacob Fatu's destructive capability, had entered a realm of power that no faction in WWE history had ever achieved. They weren't just dominant, they were systematically eliminating all potential threats before those threats could fully materialize. As weeks passed and the Royal Rumble approached, the wrestling world remained fixated on one central question. Would Brock Lesnar actually return? Could he return? Had Jacob Fatu's assault, combined with Paul Heyman's psychological warfare, finally broken the Beast Incarnate in ways that no opponent had ever managed? The uncertainty added delicious tension to an already explosive storyline. WWE programming teased Lesnar's potential return with cryptic vignettes showing empty gyms and abandoned training facilities, the implication being that somewhere, somehow, Brock Lesnar was rebuilding himself for one final confrontation. But Paul Heyman wasn't concerned. In interview after interview, he dismissed the possibility of Lesnar's return as fantasy, as the desperate hopes of fans clinging to a bygone era. Brock Lesnar is finished, Heyman declared on the go-home Smackdown before the Royal Rumble. Whether he physically returns to a WWE ring or not is irrelevant. The Brock Lesnar you knew, the Brock Lesnar you feared, the Brock Lesnar who dominated this industry, that man died on December 5th when Jacob Fatu removed him from the equation. Even if his body returns, his spirit is broken. And a broken Brock Lesnar is no threat to anyone. The stage was set. The narrative had been crafted with meticulous precision. Paul Heyman had betrayed his greatest creation, aligned himself with an even more dangerous force in Fatu, and systematically dismantled Brock Lesnar's legacy while the Beast recovered from the most brutal assault of his career. The bloodline stood stronger than ever, unified under Roman Reigns' leadership and Paul Heyman's strategic guidance, seemingly unstoppable in their quest for total WWE dominance. And yet, as the Royal Rumble approached, one question lingered in the air like smoke after an explosion. What happens when you back a legendary fighter into a corner? What happens when you take everything from a man who has built his entire identity on being the most dangerous competitor in professional wrestling? What happens when Brock Lesnar, stripped of his advocate, his reputation systematically attacked, his body broken and beaten, decides that he has nothing left to lose? Paul Heyman might be the smartest man in professional wrestling. He might have orchestrated the most brilliant betrayal in the industry's history. He might have found the perfect weapon in Fatu. But even the smartest strategist can make one fatal miscalculation. And Paul Heyman's potential miscalculation was assuming that destroying Brock Lesnar would be permanent, that the Beast incarnate would simply accept defeat and fade into history. Because if there's one thing Brock Lesnar has proven throughout his entire career, it's that he's at his most dangerous when everyone counts him out. And Paul Heyman, for all his genius, might have just created the most motivated, most focused, most dangerous version of Brock Lesnar that has ever existed. A man with absolutely nothing to lose and only one goal remaining: revenge.